Hello and welcome to Mostly Harmless Games and Guilds podcast. In today's show, we're going to be discussing the different auction house models that have arisen around ESO, including Wykkyd's new eBay-like site, ESOLoot.com, which starts tomorrow, and that has an incredible array of features that is sure to attract ESO traders all over. I'm also very pleased to announce that my co-hosts, co-counsel Cami, bonjour,
Hello.
and Tamriel Gold Goblin founder and MH Economics advisor, Chill Billy. Together, together we're going to be interviewing the famous, insightful, inspiring and yet humble creator of Ultima Online, astronaut, and now creating the very exciting Shroud of the Avatar series, Lord British himself, Mr. Richard Garriott. Welcome, Mr. Garriott. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Oh, great. Great to be with you here today. Looking forward to it.
Oh, thanks so much for coming today. I know, actually, I'll let Cammy start things off here.
Oh yeah, we had someone asking in Twitch earlier if you were going to interact with your Lord British into your game if you're going to impersonate your avatar in the game.
Well, absolutely. In fact, I don't know. For those who know the way back Ultima history, I sort of parade as Lord British, and even in the real world with some frequency. So absolutely, I've already created my Lord British character in game, and whenever we're doing these 1 weekend a month kind of pre-alpha play sessions, I'm already in as Lord British.
And
Nice.
how did you get that name, though?
Yeah, so that goes way back, all the way back to 1977, which was the year that the game Dungeons and Dragons launched. And I was a sophomore in high school at the time, and I was at a summer school, a summer class kind of thing for 7 weeks over the summer. And some of the other kids who had already discovered Dungeons and Dragons were going door to door, asking, introducing themselves to people, and then trying to drag them into a D&D campaign. And they knocked on my door and said, hi, and I answered the door, hello. And for some reason, they thought the way I said hello sounded like a British accent. And so they, on the spot, were giving everyone names. So mine was British. And as it turns out, I was born in England, although I only lived there for about a month before leaving. So I don't have an accent. But I am British. And so the Lord British moniker became my gaming characters from the first day of gaming I participated in, and has been ever since.
That's funny how important or how much a first impression can make a difference. Now we got to ask. We talk about you being an astronaut. You've been to space. How easy was it to get into that? Did you just sign up and go?
Yikes! No, that was very hard, as you might imagine. My father was a NASA astronaut, and I think while most every kid, including myself, and especially if you grew up during the Apollo era like I did, every kid at least has a period of time where they imagine that they might go to space one day. But if your father's an astronaut,
Yeah.
and your neighbors are astronauts, which mine, then you sort of believe that it might happen more than it would for most people. And so I had the space bug as a young child, and I just knew that I was going to go and I was going to make it happen one way or another. And very fortunately, I've had a pretty good career in gaming, so it's allowed me to invest in trying to open up civilian spaceflight many times over the last 30 years. But I have to tell you, a lot of those ventures that I tried to get started failed gloriously. So I've put a lot of money behind things that didn't work. But each time, you kind of learn a little bit more about what was possible and how you might be able to do it better. So I started a different entrepreneurial effort, 5 or 10 years later, and it took me, I would guess, 35 years in total from the first money I invested from the games the first early Ultimas I had made some money in. I put that money into my first space company. But finally, after 35 years, a couple years ago in 2008, I finally made my first trip into space. And so now my father and I, pictured there's my father as well. We're now the first generational astronauts. So we're the first father and son Americans. And I flew with the first father-son Russian.
That's amazing.
Nice.
Incredible.
It's some accomplishment.
Well, and
Yeah.
it wasn't easy though too, because not only was there the .com bust that sort of made things difficult for you the one time, but you had to have surgery or something too. Like you were determined to get there.
Yeah, no. In fact, in fact, even once we opened up the ability for people to fly, which took the 30 to 35 years, then you had to have the money, and so while I had the money at the time, we managed to arrange it. That's when the .com bust took it all away. So I had to build a whole new company and earn a bunch more money for the third time really in my life, but before I could afford that flight. And then when I went in for the medical checks, so I had the money, built the company, had the money, went in for medical checks, and as has happened to about 30% of all the people that we've flown, I too had a medical anomaly that was disqualifying for spaceflight. And in my case, it was your liver has really 6 lobes, but only got 5 fingers. And a lobe of your liver has an artery that feeds it and a vein that drains it. And I was missing one vein. And so I had one lobe of my liver that was sort of a dead-end blockage, which on Earth is irrelevant. Mm-hmm. But in space, if there was a depressurization event, could represent a chance for internal bleeding, which would be fatal. And so they made me actually go remove that lobe of my liver before they would allow me to fly.
Wow.
That's determination, yeah. Certainly not. You do not quit. That's awesome. And Chill.
Mr. Garriott, like I said before the interview, I'm a huge fan. I've been a fan since I'm 29 years old now. I've been a fan since I was 12 years old. And I still remember the first day that I played Ultima Online. I was, like I said, I was 12 years old. I got invited over a friend's house, and he said, "You got to try this game. You got to try this game." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I jumped on the computer, and I was sitting there playing, and I was killing pigs. Pigs, and of course they would fall over, and then I'd skin them. I'd get the meat off of them. I'd get the leather off of them, and I was killing so many pigs that I actually had so much leather on me and so much meat on me that I literally could not run anymore. I had to walk. And of course, this was back before Trammel and Felucca, and I was in the middle of. I think I was close to the Britain swamps. If you
I know where they are.
Yeah, I'm sure you probably do. Anyway, I remember almost getting to Britain, and I had all this leather on me. I was so excited. I was like, "Oh, this is awesome," and then I get about halfway there, and I run into the Britain graveyard, and I guess I was following the mountain complex there, and it's nothing shy of a miracle if you can make it out of Britain graveyard.
Yep.
During that time, anyway. So I got killed. I almost made it to the inside of the town where I would be protected by guards, and I didn't make it. I got killed. The guy actually made a point of it to cut my head off and put it over by my body, and then make a whole bunch of jokes and like putting my limbs and arms everywhere. But anyway, I experienced so much joy and fear and anger. That this guy is taking all of my leather. Of course, he had a horse, so he could carry it a lot faster. And I'm wondering. This game you're developing now, the Shroud of the Avatar, it's been called the spiritual successor of Ultima. How do you expect to capture the minds and hearts of both younger and older generations so that they can still remember, like me, 17 years later, the first day they played Shroud of the Avatar?
Well, by the way, thank you very much for the story. That's a great one that I will now remember and retell as well. And so here's sort of the way we're going about it. First of all, I agree with you that there was something very magical about Ultima Online when it first launched that I've not seen in another game since. Even in my own games. I mean, really, no one has gone back to that core sensibility. And what I find interesting about not only role-playing games in general, but MMOs specifically. I think that there are things that we have done in order to hypothetically appeal to the masses that have made the games actually less good. And here's sort of that journey in my mind. When I started with Ultima 1, 2, and 3, those games were hard and hard in the way that when you were in a dungeon, you literally had to draw a map on paper yourself, or you would get lost on the inside. There was no way you were going to get it out. I mean, there was no auto map, there was no overhead map. If you got a clue that said go talk to the woman in Intrinsic about the pearls, you better write down, I need to go talk to the woman in Intrinsic about pearls, because if 3 days later, or if you put it away for a week and came back online and didn't remember that, good luck even finding your way back to the beginning of the quest, much less what you need to do next. And because conversation was text typing, etc., there were all these manual things you had to do in order to play those early games. You really had to be a hardcore gamer. And in order to try to appeal to less hardcore gamers, we began to do things like put in maps. And some of those auto mappings, you have really nice features, like the ability to put some own labels of your own on the map. And then that expanded to things like, well, why don't you keep a quest log for me so that I don't have to remember where to go next? And then as long as you had a quest log, you went, the world's pretty big. Why don't we put some arrows down on the map to kind of at least tell you kind of which way to go when you select a particular quest? And then, as long as you're doing that, well, why don't you put an exclamation over the head of the people who you need to talk to that you haven't talked to yet, so I don't have to go talk to everyone in town. Instead, I go, that's the person I need to talk to, because he's got an exclamation point over his head. And what happened when you went down that path, and one more probably throw in there, is instead of text typing, conversation trees, where you just click on the next menu item to make the conversation go away. Well, the net result of it is all those things were done for good reason, for goodwill, to try to expand the market. But the end result is, I think most role-playing games, especially MMOs, are first of all identical to each other for all practical purposes, and brain dead, where you really are just there to, when you talk to a character, you don't bother reading any of it. You just don't click on the things that are stupid to say that will obviously offend them in start of combat, and the thing that you need to have done will be in your quest log. Then you just click on the first thing in your quest log. You frankly don't even care what it is. You're just all you need to know is, it's 5 bear pelts and come back. And you go, okay, well now there's an arrow on the map that you just kind of follow to the general area or exactly where those 5 bear pelts are, and you mine a few bears and you grind a few bears and you come back and rinse, repeat. And so I think by trying to do well, or do good for players, we've in fact we've removed the challenge and the fun and all these other important aspects. So the first thing we did is we said, okay, let's go back and rethink what of those features do we really need, and which of those features have we gone too far on? And as often as not, we think we went too far. So we're going to put a map in the game to where you can at least have some sense of where you are. We're going to put a compass in the game. But there's not going to be exclamation points over people to talk to. Go talk to whoever you think you should talk to. And there's not going to be a quest log that lists all the things that you have. But we are going to make a journal that kind of just is all the important things you kind of heard. You can scroll back through, so you don't have to write it down. But there's going to be no arrows on the map in front of you. And when you have conversation with people, you'll talk to them in English. But it's going to be smart enough to parse complex things out of what you say, like, hello, bartender, my name is Lord British, and I would sure like a glass of ale. And that bartender goes through that and says, oh, you said hello, so I'm going to say hello back. You said your name was Lord British, so well met, Lord British. You would like an ale. Ah, very good. Which type would you like? I've got these 3 on tap. And so we're creating quite sophisticated NPCs, but you do have to type to them. And so I think, first of all, we're going to recapture a lot of the spirit of this middle period, solving some of the problems, but not hand-holding, that will take us into a sweet spot of gameplay that I think is more powerful than some of the ways that it has gone since. A harder one, and the one we still debate internally, goes back to that sense of danger that you described so well. And even for me and most of the team, our memories are of those both joyous and horrible things that happened to us all during that period. And that's one of the things we debate here at length. And so, for example, Star Long, who's really the other strongest voice in the design other than myself, the big debate we have is, you described having your head cut off and your arms and legs cut off and set beside you. As you probably remember, you could also have your meat flayed, and people make jerky out of it and bake some of your parts in pies.
What? Your piece of your body, or?
Yep.
Yes,
Holy
piece of your body. And so
Game of Thrones.
Star is of the opinion that that's going too gross. He's saying, I understand you want to count coup, and so maybe a scalp or an ear or a tooth so you can count coup of who you've killed, but he, at the moment, is resistant to, I would go all the way. I would actually let you literally draw and quarter them and make pies and jerky and whatever else, because I think there's no harm done in it. It's good fun, and it makes good stories. But we'll see. Star is currently winning the battle, so we're on scalps and ears and teeth at the moment. But I still am on the push to go all the way to cooking you up in a pie and making beef jerky out of you.
Wow. Okay, this got a lot of comments from the audience. So we got people dodging saying quest hub done, next quest hub please, and other people saying just no wonder questing is just a grind for most games, that it's just mind-numbing, that the what else? Wedge asking, as Jim Sterling says, appeal to a wider audience, but and someone else, Wykkyd, saying about some games even have glowing trails that lead you to your target. Like, it's just crazy. That Wait, saying, I like the way you think, Mr. Garriott.
Thanks. But actually, that reminds me of something I should probably say, which is, we were talking before we started about the target audience. One of the things we decided early on is we are not making this game for people that we don't know are already gamers. I mean, maybe it'll appeal to them. Maybe we're lucky that we'll pick up some, people who have never played any games or this type of game before, and I hope we do, by all means. But we are designing this game for, the people with us right now. You know what I mean? We're not creating this for social media gamers. We're not making this game for casual gamers. We are making this for gamers, and that's why we're so careful to be working so closely with the community all the way through this development process, which is sort of a side effect of the crowdfunding we did. But there's an interesting story about Ultima Online and a terrible mistake we made that most players don't even know about, that cost us a lot of money, but it was a mistake that we won't make in this current model. And what I mean by that is when we developed UO, we went all the way to beta before we let other people play. Whereas in Shroud of the Avatar, we have people playing right now. So if you're one of our backers or choose to become one of our backers, you can play a weekend a month starting now. And we only do it a weekend a month, so you can't churn through the tiny amount of content we have yet. We want to save a lot of that for later, of course. But in Ultima Online, we built a whole variety of pretty sophisticated systems, of course, to make the game work. Well, one of those that we created was a virtual ecology. And that virtual ecology went something like this. We had grass. The grass of the world actually created stalks. You couldn't really see them, but the game knew that grass had sprouted, and that was something to eat for the herbivores. And so the sheep and deer would come to equilibrium based upon the amount of grass in an area. And that means they would generally populate this grassy area, but not that rocky area, because they would naturally wander in and stay and linger and find population equilibrium with the volume of grass that was created. And then we could introduce carnivores that we'd start up in the mountains, like wolves or whatever, and the wolves would come down to the mountains looking for food, and they would eat some of the deer and rabbits and sheep and such. And they would also, again, find equilibrium, because if they overate the herbivores, then they would have nothing to eat, and they would tend to die off also. And when the players were introduced, when we tested it ourselves with 2 or 3 people in the game at a time, we would go out and kill some of the sheep or rabbits, and the wolves would forage farther, and they might forage into a town, and the townspeople would be eaten, and so they would automatically spawn a quest for players to go and kill the wolves to bring it back into equilibrium. And we thought, wow, how beautiful. We built this thing that we thought was great. And in our internal testing, it worked great. It took us many, many, many months to build it all into the game. And then we turned on the game and went live. And what happened is so many people were roaming every inch of the land at all hours that none of the sheep or wolves or rabbits or deer survived more than 5 minutes. And there was no speed of spawning we could turn it up to that would ever let the virtual ecology begin to manifest, because people were engaging and destroying everything basically as soon as they saw it. And so all that work that we put into the game to do this feature went completely ignored forever. And so it was eventually just ripped out, just we didn't have to maintain the code. But it was literally a complete waste of time. And had we had people in earlier, there's many more bad design for the player mistakes even that we made in UO that we would have known about and would make those mistakes. And so we are making this game for the gamers, with the gamers involved now, so that they can give us this feedback. And as we do PvP versus PvE stuff, they can give us feedback immediately when it's in its nascent form, and we can quit spending money and time on the things that people don't want and double down on the things people do want.
That's a good point, that sometimes things are good on paper, but when you actually try it, it's not as you thought it would be.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, given that you've got $4 million raised right now, is that correct?
Yep.
And you've got no subscription for the game. You're just going to charge by the chapter that they're going to buy. There will be chapters sort of like Guild Wars 1 had various installments that people could buy, and then no fees after that. And that was really nice. That worked really well for that game. I really enjoyed it. How many people do you need to make this successful, in your opinion?
Well, so that's a good question, and it kind of depends on the dollars per person that ultimately is put in and other things too. But I think that even right now we have about 100,000 new Britannians, and those are people who have made an account, and we have about 30,000 backers, and those are people who have given us the $4 million. So
right.
We've got $4 million from 30,000 people. So if we eventually bring the other 70,000 people on board, and they become even modest players, they just buy the game and maybe a house, then we're set. So we're done. And if it goes bigger than that, hallelujah. But we think something on the order of 100,000 is enough to be sustainable.
Yep.
Now I actually think we should be able to get to 250,000 would be a guess. And if we were wildly successful, we'd do at least UO numbers, which means that in 2 years or so we'd make 1 million or 2 copies. But if we start threatening WoW, wouldn't that be great? But again, that's not necessary.
Yep.
We think 100,000 is probably a good target.
So you got a nice niche market. That's awesome, because that allows you to really focus in on that. That if you're not constrained by needing, like some games like ESO needs to pay back $300 million. So they made design decisions based on that, and that appeals to certain people, and unfortunately, of course, it dumbs down the game a little bit sometimes. So that sounds awesome.
And we're trying to keep our expectations as our needs as low as possible. I mean, our hopes and expectations, sometimes we let run wild.
Sure.
But we're trying to do this extraordinarily efficiently. We let our larger backers come by and visit the office and things too, and we don't waste a penny at this office, which has not been true of, if you're part of a bigger company, you live in pretty nice offices. You may have noticed, my office behind me, the desk behind me is being used for hardware assembly. My office is the only one-person office, and that's because we also use this as our conference room when we need to have meetings. So, this is the biggest space that exists here in our office, and yet it's still used for QA testing and assembly of hardware, just to make sure we're not.
That's awesome that you're focused on the game so much and not office space. That's good. That now in this game, are there going to be 10,000 people? Say 100,000 people. Are they on launch day? Are 100,000 people going to be in that first starting area?
Well, the way the game. So if you remember UO versus WoW, most MMOs are level-gated zones. There's a low-level zone, and you spread out into higher and higher level zones. That is not the Ultima way. My games have always are built really level independent, and so there is no starting zone. The whole world is your oyster starting at day one. There might be a dungeon to go into that you wouldn't want to go into until you get a little more time under your belt. But there won't be any like a fence of level 10 monsters that until you're level 10 will prevent you from exploring that part of the map. And so we actually start the game by distributing people widely into the world.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Now you mentioned also in this and other interviews that people are going to run into their friends more than strangers and stuff because of the, not shards, but the way the, was it phasing you described it as? How is that going to work? Are there people going to be, am I going to get a question when I start making my account or character that says, okay, you go by Rook in game as a real life person. You're 40 years old. You watch Game of Thrones. You listen to this kind of music, and you tend to behave like a criminal in games, or you tend to take the high road most of the time instead and be a good person. That will give me a second coding or third coding that will match me up more with people that I might become friends with.
No, it's interesting. So half of what you say is exactly what we're doing. The other half is very interesting. I'll have to think about that now. But what we're really interested in doing is reinforcing the social network that you already have, and that's job one.
Yep.
And job two is to reinforce burgeoning social connections once you have them in the game. And so again, even the people you know, even if we let me take them one at a time. So first, we want to know who you know to the best degree we have. And so the game at the beginning will ask you to help us know that. And so we haven't written all these pieces of code yet, but so I'm not sure exactly which set of these will be in. But if, for example, you give us your Facebook friends, or if you give us your email connections, or if you somehow we can tie into your guild listings, wherever it might be, any way that we can get a seed to know who the people you already do have a social connection to, that will mean that we make those very strong bonds. Those are literally friend bonds, and those are ones that we will support the strongest. But even if we have that, nominally a person's tribe of people they're connected with is 150 people at most. Mm-hmm. And statistically, again, the probability of you being in the same town at the same hour in the same game is fairly low. Most of the people you'll see are not your direct friends. We're going to put you in with people who are not your direct friends. But what we're going to do is, as soon as you see one person, even on the screen, even from a distance, we're going to give you a tick that you've seen that real world person one time. And that means that versus a true stranger, we might as well put that person in the same shard as you, the same instance as you, next time. Because after you see that person 5 or 10 times in the same pub, there's a much higher probability of you saying hi to each other than if you see a completely different person in the pub each time you go into the pub. And so we're going to mathematically keep adding to the social connections that you have, even by sight. But if you ever have a real friend, that's a super strong one. If you ever party with somebody, that's a super strong one. If you're in the same guild together, that's a super strong one. But even just having a conversation on the street with someone is much better than a stranger.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm certainly not looking for matchmaker.com. That got a wife, got lots of friends, everything's good. But I'm always curious about that because certainly within our guild, we have a very fun community. We talk about the bus test that would you want to spend 4 or 5 hours sitting in a TeamSpeak room talking with this person, because you're going to spend that possibly every night with these people. So you form very strong bonds, or sometimes it doesn't work out, but it certainly would be interesting to have something in a game like this that where you're pairing people up that actually suggests that maybe you're not the best mix with that 13-year-old kid that thinks that he's going to just sit there and do something totally different that wouldn't interest you and stuff, or maybe that'd be a good enemy someday that
Right, well, don't forget, we also purposely and again, we haven't written, these are fairly deep into the plot, so these have not been written yet, so I'm speaking hypothetically. One of the plans we have is that let's suppose you are a player and you decide to take a mission, which I would describe as a clandestine mission. To use a modern metaphor, it might be to take illegal drugs from one side of the world to another side of the world. Well, if you accept that mission, no matter what type of player you might have been before that, it will warn you that, by the way, if you accept this mission, you are now going to be at risk of being hunted down by other players. And it will tell you that in advance. And if you accept that mission, as you now travel the world, we're going to go out and tell people. And so we're actually going to, so it may not be your friends, we're going to tell people that we think would be appropriate or at the right level, or for whatever reason the game determines are the right people to put opposite you. Now, that will then reinforce a friend connection so that you see them again in the future, and whether they're your frenemy or an enemy is up to you guys to determine. But we will purposefully violate our own friends graph in order to create things that we think of as fun from a gameplay standpoint.
That's awesome.
That's pretty interesting, and it's going to be really, really interesting to follow up how it's going to work out and what are the situations that are going to come out of it. And I want to go back on something you mentioned earlier when you said that when you take quests, a lot of us are just used like with the latest MMO to just like hit next, 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 like, and accept it. Now you said that we're going to be able to type. How is it going to work with the internalization and localization and all that? Like, is there going to be any issue? Is there going to be like any autocorrect like we see like on the phone sometimes, like people type stuff and it just interpret differently?
Yeah, good question. And so far, we don't plan to have an autocorrect, but we are trying to, and all the data structures are set up well prepared for localization. But we don't know exactly yet how we're going to do the localization. We've had our community offer to do some, and even this prequel story that a gentleman named Tracy Hickman, if you know, the author of the Dragonlance series, he's written a pre-story called Blade of the Avatar. Actually, we wrote it together, but he's the real writer, so he did the final wording. But we've already had our community has localized that and offered it back out into the community to various languages. And so our community has offered to localize the game for us as well, but we're not sure yet that's going to, a localization has to be at a very consistent level of quality and with a very consistent, set of words and terminology, throughout. And so we think we'll need to do that professionally or at least through a single source. But it's still too early for us to know exactly what that will be, but we do anticipate at least being in German, French, and Spanish as some languages, and we're in discussions with a Russian partner that part of their partnership contribution might also be to get it in Russian. But we'll see. None of those plans are set. Those are things we're still discussing.
Very cool. That Cami and I had some stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, which brings me up to something that I maybe should have said earlier, but I'll say here. With something we've started doing as a team now. Every time we get online and start talking about hypotheticals, it's a term that Star started maybe about a month ago, which is "Don't lawyer me, bro," which means that things that I'm talking about in the hypothetical are things we hope will come to pass, but there's some chance that they won't. And but our community is already starting to do things like rewind to 5 minutes into this particular talk we did and said, well, you promised that we were going to get this, that, or the other thing. And so now the "don't lawyer me, bro" is really important to put out there to say, I'm talking about our plans, not the guarantees in many cases.
That's awesome. I might steal that. You talked about in one of the articles about ethical parables and stuff, you mentioned it already about taking contraband and going from one area and trying to get to another area. That is so exciting. Like I remember running, now I think it was in Eve, and I was running medical supplies from one system to another. I jump into low sec and I'm cloaked and I'm waiting to see if anybody there is there to kill me, and then moving on from there. And it's the same as Chill was talking about, the excitement of trying to move from one area, and the players make the fun. Do you have any other scenarios like that you can tell us about, hypothetically?
I can tell you one that's not even hypothetical. This one's actually in the design right now, and it was recently passed over to our writer that's doing the conversations. But in one of the three main threads that you might start on first, you discover a dead body that you're directed over to because it has some keys that you need to get out of this zone. But in addition, you also find identification papers on that body, and the character who's here dead is named Tracy, a purposefully gender inspecific name. Happens to also be named after our writer, Tracy Hickman. But what you then find in the very next city you go to is that people are very suspicious of people like you who have come here from Earth, which is also traditional in a lot of my games, that you are an Earthling who has found a gateway to come here, in this case to New Britannia. And because there are prophecies that say really bad things are going to happen because this person has come back into New Britannia, a lot of people really don't like the fact that you're there. And so when you go to this next town, having just found this set of identification papers, you're challenged at the front gates and said, who are you? And if you've already learned from a couple other encounters that if you say, hey, it's me, Lord British, I'm the Avatar, or whatever it might be, the people go like, well, I have nothing. Oh, I want to have nothing to do with you in that case. And so you come up to a town where you know that this is the next step that you need to go through, and you've had it reinforced that very likely the way to get into this town without any hassle is to say, hey, I'm Tracy. I've got the paperwork to prove it right here. I'm Tracy. And as you might imagine, that actually will in fact let you in the town easier, but the game knows you just lied. And so this is the kind of thing that will unfold before you as you play through this game.
That is amazing. I love it. I think it was Knights of the Old Republic. All the questions that you were asking, and if you asked and did certain things, you might lose certain companions that were with you. And those moral dilemma questions that bright a light or dark side, that's awesome. I love that you're going to have stuff like that in the game. I think, Cammy, that was actually brings up to your question there about virtue and how does that work in the game?
Yeah, you mentioned in one of your video where you were killed a chicken that would hurt your virtue. How does that work?
Killed a chicken that would hurt your virtue? Oh, I'm not exactly sure what chicken I would be talking about in that particular case. But here is the general metaphor that I've enjoyed doing since Ultima 4. But I also think that a lot of games have misinterpreted and done slightly, but importantly, wrong in recent histories when incorporating virtues. If when you were like, let me give you an example of Ultima 4. In Ultima 4, there was a blind herb seller that when you would go buy herbs for her for your magic, she would tell you, okay, if you want 3 of this and 5 of that and 7 of this, the total will be 90 gold pieces. Please leave 90 gold pieces in the coffer on your way out. And if you walked out without leaving any coins, she would say, hey, don't forget to leave money in the coffer. And if you would only leave 1 coin, she would say, hey, did you leave enough money in the coffer? But as long as you put 2 coins or more, she'd say thank you very much and let you walk out. And so what almost every player learned to do was leave 2 coins and walk out, because every player is trying to min-max their way to success. And that appeared to be the best way to min-max your way to success. But of course, the game at that moment knows exactly how much you left and knows exactly how much you were supposed to leave. And so the game can immediately tick you off as a lying cheater.
Wow.
And what happened in Ultima 4 was later on in the game, you had to go back to that same woman for a clue that was important to solving the game. And if you were one of the 99% who were cheating her every time you went to her, because she had to go to her all the time, and so if you cheated her and cheated her and cheated her, your virtue rating on honesty had gone down, 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 down. She would say, I'd love to help the hero that's here to save us, because that's exactly the person I would love to give this magic clue to. But you're the most dishonest, thieving scumbag I've ever met, so no way I'm going to help you. And the reason why that works is because you de-link the time of the behavior and the notification about your behavior. If you give them the notification immediately, if you saw a -1 truth happening at the time you were cheating, then you instantaneously know I'm just not going to do that. And so a lot of people who have tried to emulate what I've done in Ultimas have said, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to show truth by doing this, or show love by doing that? And I'm going, no, you kind of missed the point. The whole point is to encourage you to behave badly by rewarding the bad behavior with the instant results that are usually the cause of people behaving badly, and only record that fact and let them continue to live, to be the way they really are until much later before you tip and show them what happened. And so that's what we're doing in this game as well. And it gets each game I do, it gets harder because people are sort of onto it. And so I have to be much more sinister in the enticements. And you have to, if a good way to look at it would be like, if I make the bad thing light enough, small enough, and the reward big enough, most everyone would do it. So, for example, how many of you have ever sped on the highway? Huh? Most of you?
Might have
Okay,
been.
so most of us do it. Most of at least have done it. And that's because, the reward of getting there sooner outweighed the cost of the potential speeding ticket. And
But is there... sorry. Is there always the consequences, though? Can you get away with murder?
So very important question. And another reason not to tell people exactly what they're being judged on at the time they're being judged is because, there's always exploits in a game. There, in fact, might be a way you could get away with murder because you literally might find a loophole in our way to detect that you were doing a murder. In fact, it happened in early Ultima Online. In Ultima Online, while you couldn't attack players in town because the guards would be summoned and they would throttle you, what people did in early Ultima Online is there were roving bands of carpenters. And what these carpenters would do is they would get 8 people at a time, 8 carpenters, would raise their carpentry skill to the point of being able to make chests of drawers. And then they would find an unsuspecting person in the town, and all at the same time they would make a chest of drawers and set one in each of the 8 tiles around them, like the 8 squares of a tic-tac-toe board, around the person in the middle. And at the same time, they would light a flask of oil and leave it burning in the center tile, which means now no one has attacked the player, yet that player is now trapped in burning oil and will ultimately die. and then they could remove the chest of drawers and loot the body right in the middle of town, right in the middle of all the guards. Okay? So that was a way to cheat, and the reason why they could figure that out is because they could see what made the guards respond in real time. But what I also found is that if by separating the test, the virtue test, and the feedback about the virtue test, if you separate them by very large spans of time, you actually don't know which of your behaviors I tested. And so I might have tested you killing somebody in town, or I might not have been able to test killing somebody in a dungeon, or I might not have been able to test killing with a flash of oil, but all you know is that when you came back, you got scolded for killing somebody. And we don't know which one of those it was that you did or didn't get away with. And so it's really important to not give the immediate feedback because it lets people sink to their lowest level of behavior naturally.
Wow. Do have a question from the audience. There's been a lot of comments here, but definitely want to get to. It's actually their ID is Tabula Rasa 2 for the win. Haven't been following SOTA as of late. He was wondering if the early backer is still ongoing, and is there a launch date set?
So a few things in a row there. So one, Tabula Rasa 2 for the win. Thank you. By the way, I personally was a fan of Tabula Rasa, not just because we made it, obviously, but I think we did some really interesting things like control points and AIs looking for cover during combat, and those things we're bringing forward into Shroud of the Avatar, by the way. So some of the best features of Tabula Rasa we're hopefully going to pull forward here into Shroud of the Avatar. But the other parts of the questions were, is the early backer pledges going? And sadly, that just ended 3 weeks ago. So we ran those early backer rewards for 1 full year from the Kickstarter, from the start of Kickstarter, and we just passed that date. However, if you just become a backer, the lowest level of backer that gets full beta access, which really means anytime we open the servers, it's $45. So it's basically pre-buying the game. So if you pre-order the game effectively, every weekend, 1 weekend a month, we open up the servers to let our backers play, and so you'd be part of that experience. And the launch date, what's interesting about that is that the thing we call launch date is the game's really never going to be done. The question is, for us, is when will we quit erasing characters, quit doing server wipes, and when will we leave it up 24 hours a day? And the things we're waiting for to do that are, first of all, that the entire first story can be solved, and that all of the main maps are completed. And we're hopeful that we can still do that before the end of the year, that those conditions will be met, that we'll be able to turn on the servers full time, and the full thing will be solvable. But it might be, some months after that we'll still be doing things like certain kinds of pets or certain kinds of guild functions. We don't really know what'll be in or out, but we'll keep developing it forever. So as long as people like it.
That's awesome. Well, and a lot of comments here. There's Mellow Mayhem, Toxic Talk. If the game ends up being as good as the projected ideas, it will be incredible. But that's talking about SOTA. Doomgrin75 saying $45 he just bought plus $15 a month for 10 months is what he's done. Pedro saying he loved the way Tabula Rasa was designed, the class system and subclass, and as you progressed, the need to buy ammo, the NPCs taking over towns if they weren't thinned down. Just all incredible stuff. Yeah.
Yes, and those are exactly the features we're bringing forward. And so those control points, those takeover points. In fact, you remember I mentioned these three kind of initial starting threads of the game that kind of push you into major quadrants of the world to begin with. And while a lot of the map can be moved through relatively frequently, we're using that control point type stuff from Tabula Rasa as an important gateways in mountain ranges to where if the players don't work together to keep those points on the map free, then you'll sort of be trapped in one section of the world unless you either find a lunar rift to teleport across or get a gang of people together to come free a zone.
Wow. Okay. We've got to ask, as a PvP-focused guild, we went into a game here with like hundreds of allies and stuff. Of course, Sean Dragon from the Syndicate. We fought with and against PRX and other big PvP guilds. People like to fight. Some guilds like to fight, and we certainly do, just good fights. Doesn't matter, win or lose, we're laughing all the time.
Right.
But there are certainly lots of groups that just want to fight fights that they can win. How are you going to do that in this game? I've just read recent articles about the guild versus guild, the castle sieges potentially taking place. That's one of your next fundraiser goals. Will there be potential siege caps that I can say, hey, yeah, we'd like to fight you. We have 200 members in game. We're going to field 50 that night or that weekend. Have a contract basically to, yeah, we can fight each other, and this is the maximum number that can be deployed.
Well, we hadn't actually talked about the maximum number who can be deployed. That's actually an interesting idea that we've not at least discussed internally. But everything else you said is right in line with the design thinking at this point for how we're going to support guilds, is the ability to... So guilds for us start with the data definition of this is a group of friends who define themselves as guild. It also means that they can have shared property. You can jointly own a physical structure, and that can be any of the physical structures in the game, from a tiny little hut in the village up through a castle and guild halls and things of that nature. You would be able to jointly own and have communal access to, and set control levels as to who can take from, give to, modify that guild property. And it also means that you have a status vis-a-vis other guilds, alliance and or enemies, and so that puts everybody in that kind of PvP status with those declarations. We hadn't covered the idea of number of people to field or having tools to turn the event off, so to speak, other than manually. But those are good ideas, and when we get further along, it would be great to come back to you guys and get some ideas from you to help us provide the features. Those aren't difficult features to turn on. So getting those from guilds like yourselves would be great.
Certainly very interested in testing that kind of stuff, and I know a few of us have already bought our stuff, and a few more are buying them right now, it sounds like, from the stream, so that's awesome. Cami?
Yeah, we heard about loot and PvP. Not that we like loot, but maybe we do. Is it going to be possible to level just doing PvP and get loot from there and good loot?
Yeah, well, so looting rules are another interesting thing. If you remember, again, in our quandary of how far to push the UO paradigm, the early UO paradigm, that's another debate we have internally. There's a lot of people who would push to go all the way to full loot all the time, and we've not currently gone that far. We're currently to the point where PvP. Well, first of all, if you challenge somebody, you'll probably be able to set looting to whatever level you wish on a direct challenge. But in the nominal open world PvP, we're thinking that the nominal level of looting will be much more restricted. And even have the ability for many of the things that might have been lootable to have the ability to pay a ransom that's twice what it's worth to not lose the one special item. Because we found that if in fully open loot, that people often wouldn't take their number one best thing with them. They just leave it at home, and it would kind of be out of play because they really just couldn't risk losing it. Although we've had people make the counter argument also of saying, well, if you're going to really win, you need to take your best stuff. So that's something we're still playing with, and we'll still feel it out as a real easy thing to throttle up and down. But if you're asking, will you get experience points at levels? Absolutely. We have had some discussions as to whether, and we'll need to play test into this to figure it out, as to whether people could basically cheat and level up by just agreeing to meet on a field and clobber each other back and forth. So we'll need to make sure that if there's too much PvP leveling that allows you to cheat the game in other ways, then we may need to make a special class of PvP advancement. There's at least some discussion of that going on, but again, that's not a decision. That's just don't lawyer me, bro. That's a discussion.
That's awesome. Chill has a keen interest in money, particularly in money in games. You had some questions with the economic system in SOTA there, Chill?
Yeah, dealing with our latest thing was Elder Scrolls Online, and the economy. Sadly, we had to lay it to rest because it did nothing whatsoever. It pretty much every value, but economies are important for the continuance of a game's popularity. Ultima Online again had one of the best economies out there because the player was responsible for the bulk of the trade. There were no auction houses, things like that. You had live auction houses. You had vendors, and you had those support things available for the player. Now other games, they don't have auction houses, but they have no other support for a player to get out there and sell those things. But for me, a good source of income in the Ultima Online time that I played was repairing items for players and building crafts and containers and traps and oil pots and cabinets. And of course, cartography was a big skill for me.
You just nailed it. You've just described our design like nailed it. And so because as we were talking about in the kind of the pre-show, our number one thing we've decided we don't want to do is compete with the player economy. And we're going to make the game invent things, whether that's gold or equipment, only as a last resort. Only if literally it can't be made. In fact, if you already go today, if you get in the beta of the game now and you play next weekend we open, you'll find that our crafting tables, our crafting process, not only does it go back to raw materials, whether that's grain or fish you just killed or meat you just killed or some ore you just brought back, but once you start with that ore and you begin to do things like smelt it, and you smelt it into sheets or bars, or you can then do things like get a wire mold to pull that through to make wire to use for things that need wire. But let's suppose you need to cut some timbers into a length. Well, there's a cubit measure in the game, but we're going to put 1 cubit measure in the game because if someone else needs a cubit measure, you can make one with some wood and a cubit measure. And if you need to make another wire mold, well, you can make a mold out of the wire mold and then cast a wire mold. And so we literally are going to go back to even tools. Every base piece of everything is craftable in the game. So all we need to do is seed the game with a single copy of it to the very earliest players, and everything else should spread on its own. And we're even going to do that same thing with a lot of the emotes and not earned skills by leveling, but just sort of social behaviors, the Macarena or whatever else. We'll put those in there as things you can do a secure trade and teach from one person to another. And that way, people can say, well, sure, I could teach you, but since nobody else around this town knows it and I'm the only guy, I'll do it for 5 gold. Or, once pretty much everybody has it and now the value is lower, sure, I'll teach you just because you're my buddy. So, teach me something and I'll teach you it back. And so even those social things are going to make tradable. So we're pushing as much as we can directly into the player-to-player economy and we're going to try to stay out of that business to the degree that it's possible.
In Ultima Online, I was able to, and thank you, that pretty much answered my question before I even asked it. But in Ultima Online, I was able to catch a whole lot of fish and put them across tables, and then keep, set it up in my house. Here I got fish for sale, and put it out on those tables, and then people would come in and buy that fish, make fish pies and things like that. But today's MMOs, they focus more on vendor transactions instead of player-to-player transactions. Can we expect more of a player-to-player interaction or a player-to-vendor interaction?
Oh, that's a good question. So we're going to give you vendors, but we're going to give you vendors a la UO vendors. So you'll be able to do player transactions, but it's hard for me to predict which one will become the most popular. But what you said, though, about fish and making pies did remind me of one other thing worth mentioning, which is, food is also going to be relevant in this game, and there are certain things in UO that we did that we only made them deeper and better after launch, because it's only after launch we realized they'd be popular. And now that we're kind of developing with people playing it while we're developing it, we're hopefully going to see a lot of these things sooner. But for example, as you might remember in UO when it launched, fishing was literally the simplest simulation possible. Use a fishing pole, cast it in the water, 50-50 chance, get a fish. Beginning and end, no other simulation. That was it. And yet people would develop their own belief systems, like, oh, if I fish over here, I catch more fish than over here. But in fact, it really wasn't. It's 50-50. I don't care what you do. But it became so popular that we decided to make it more interesting. And so this time we know that fishing is going to be popular, and so we're going to make a much more sophisticated fishing to where during different seasons, certain fish species are more prevalent. When you catch one, its size will be slightly randomized. For certain species, you want to do it under the docks or near weeds or the shore, and for certain species, you want to fish in the deeper water. We're going to make it, much more sophisticated, which means we can even have things like trophy fish of the week or the day or the month or whatever it is, because it's all going to be randomized and seasonally changed and actually have some skill associated with it. So it'll be a reasonable thing to do. But also, then once those are just raw materials, we're going to make food cooking. There's a whole suite of cooking skills that are already in the game, and what you cook is actually relevant, because we're going to do it with a bit of a fantasy fictional eye, but with a nod towards reality, in the sense of, if you eat sugary, caffeinated things, it will give you a temporary boost of energy. If you eat the vitamin-rich or fat content, it'll give you better long-term energy. And there's a finite amount of food you can shove in your gullet between any two sessions. So you can't, in UO and most role-playing games and most of my work too, you can just keep eating food and healing yourself sort of forever. And we're going to make this to where you actually have to think about your food. You're going to say, look, if I want to really pay attention to my long-term health, to really maximize my ability to adventure, then I'm going to shove the right things in my pie hole, for what I happen to need for right now. And it might be that we literally go, chew on that Snickers bar before I go into battle, give me that rush of energy right now.
Will your character become fatter?
I was going to say, so I can get fat in a game too?
Yeah. Well, we don't currently have that yet, but you never know. Yeah, we could do that too, I suppose.
Have to go to the gym and keep in shape.
Yeah. Go up some mountains. There's a couple things from the audience. I think it was Future and Wykkyd who were talking about diminishing returns if you kill a certain person, or maybe anything in the game. If you keep grinding the same person or thing in the game, that there could be a diminishing return that might increase after a certain point. Pedro mentioning that he fished in Jalam thinking it gave more fish. So there are some things like that for sure.
Very cool. All the same, 50-50. That's it.
Yeah. Well,
but
Mr.
Yeah,
Garriott.
that's interesting too. And the proposal of diminishing returns for killing the same thing over and over, that's a really good idea. We haven't talked about that much internally, but I agree with the sentiment. So I'll take that back again to the team. I think that's an interesting proposal.
Cool. I was going to ask you what you would tell people if they're thinking about buying into this project. I think I'll tell you why I'm going to buy into it. Guilds battling each other. I certainly want to get into that testing and stuff. I'm certainly curious about the possibilities there. You had me at contraband. Not that I necessarily want to run it. There's a part of me that certainly does. But that idea of part of my fun, my entertainment being with player driven, that a quest has some, I would be scared for my character at times, and I want that. And I think most of all, I mean, we talked about space and how you just attempt after attempt and you made it work. This is a Kickstarter project, but it's a game that's going on right now and in development and coming along ways. Mostly, I think just I believe in you. You're quite an interesting person, and you certainly don't give up. So I'm in. Thanks very much for coming here today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. And since you also asked, what do I recommend to people? It's interesting because we have like we mentioned very early on, we have 30,000 people who have already backed us, and we have 70,000 more people who are now following us, are on the mailing list and have an account on our website and can, are seeing our regular updates. And so for us, our goal is to try to get people to just put a toe in the water. And for us, that and a toe in the water for us is that $45, effectively a pre-sale, even though it's not legally a pre-sale. And for us, as long as people do that, then they've sort of opened the door to help judge and decide whether they should deepen their experience and if they want to be property owners, and decide if they should sell their friends or not. And then they're really not only a judge, a more fair judge, but they're also participating in helping us make it the game they want. And we didn't really talk much about the community folks that have been really diving in so well with us. But we started crowdfunding thinking we were just going to get just money. But what we discovered was that we have incredibly capable community, from design and art and music and stories and coats of arms, in all these fields that we had no idea that we had such talent in the community. And the reason why I sound so surprised about it is a lot of games, or even places like Second Life or Dr. Cat, who helped us make a lot of the early Ultimas, he went and did this game called Dragon Spires, and there's some other MMOs I'm thinking of. Wolfpack's game that they did here in town, that was much more open, creatable in the game by players. Anything that is 100% open to player creation has a problem with, or often has a problem with, curation. You end up with a whole bunch of junk that a lot of people have put in, and very hard to find high-quality tidbits. And so I've always been fairly skeptical of community sourcing of contribution into a product, having seen it go so poorly in so many in my mind. But it's fascinating that, when we had, first it was the College of Arms who came up and not only said, look, we saw that you've signed up thousands of people who you have to give unique coats of arms to. How in the world are you going to manage that process? And we said, frankly, we don't know yet. And so they said, well, not only can we help you do that, but we'll even write the tools to let people automatically do it on their own and create it and output it in a way that can be directly imported in the game. So they've completely done that on their own, and it's beautiful and it's magical and it's perfect for exactly what we needed. And then there's the Poet Circle, who are not only fan fiction writers, but also composers. And a lot of them were putting some things up on SoundCloud and saying, hey, here's a song I wrote, hope you might want to use it in Shroud of the Avatar. And to be honest, when I first started listening to them, I'm going like, well, without trying to cast any judgment on them as a composer, it's nothing I would want to put in the game, because it doesn't have period instruments. It sounds it's too modern. Even the composition itself sounds too modern. It's not of the world that I at least have in my head, so there's no way I could take this in. And so I was going like, yeah, I'm going to have to very sadly got to tell these people no, 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 no. 100% of all the early stuff that people were contributing was no. And but then that group got together and they said, Richard, why don't you just tell us exactly what it is you do want for this game? And so I put together, spent an evening creating here's my dissection of all the games that I've done in the past, the middle Ultimas that had the best music, the guy Ken Arnold, who I think did some of the best compositions and the very simply voiced early music. Here's where some of it became too movie-like, too overproduced, even if it was in the right instruments. Here's this kind of too modern instrumentation stuff that you guys have done. Here's the sweet spot. This piece, this is what I want, is the world should sound like this, but with these kind of vectors. And they went, got it. And then they ran off on their own for 2 or 3 weeks. They even went and did their own Kickstarter to get a whole new sound effects library for their group. They self-policed and gave each other feedback and read, carefully went through the document that I provided. And since that day, 3 weeks later, when they started bringing back music, every piece, literally 100%, they went from batting 0 to perfect, all on their own, all as the community. And so I'm just floored at the power of gaming communities these days. It's so much more powerful than I had given it credit for.
Yeah, well, we've certainly all matured and gained more skills and stuff, and it's different from when we were 15 and playing these games and loving them, and now we're all adults with kids and a few more skills under our belts. So that's an interesting point. And it was the SCA, wasn't it, that did was doing the coat of arms?
Yeah, well, that's where a lot of them got their initial training. Okay. The SCA does let people who participate get coats of arms, but they have to do it in a fairly historical way. And again, like the Poet Circle, I sat down with the College of Arms and said, okay, well, we're not trying to recreate historical arms. We are a fantasy game. But the things that are good about historical arms is that they're simple to describe and they're iconic, and they were made in period times so that you could tell who was who from a distance to know who your friends and who your enemies were. Right. And to make sure that things were distinct from each other, so two people didn't have very similar looking things from a distance. And so we adopted some of those rules, but specifically, in a discourse with each other, we set the rules of New Britannia. And they went, okay, got it. And they modified their tools to be able to keep those rules straight, and again, tuned their output to what we could import into the game, and really solved a problem for us that we frankly didn't know how we were going to solve. We made a promise during Kickstarter that we hadn't gotten around to figuring out how we were going to solve it, and they solved it for us.
That's incredible. I know we talked about some stuff before the show. We've had such a good chat. Is there anything else that we talked about before the show even started, before even the pre-show, when we were chatting there at the beginning, that you wanted to cover?
Yeah, let's see. It's hard to rewind back now to be sure. That's actually something interesting. Let me just reach behind me here. Hang on a second.
And while you're doing that, I'll tell people that there are some people in the audience there that they've just said that they bought the $45 and then they're paying the monthly fee to get into the Kickstarter to sort of spread out the payments and stuff and make it. And that's an interesting point. You can just buy in at $45. It's just like buying the game, and then from there you can pursue it more in the future even with payment plans if you want.
Yeah, and the other thing, the reason why I stepped away from this to grab something I'll put up on the screen in a second. It's interesting. I mentioned this crowd sourcing now that people are doing. We have people making art, Unity, 3D model textured, items and creatures and all kinds of things that are going right into the game. We have people making music, as I mentioned. We have people doing the College of Arms, and we're going to be working on. We need thousands of books in the game. So the Poet Circle and a separate group of writers are going to, create. Once we've released more and more of the backstory, they're starting to create more and more fill-in the backstory that will be in books and things found throughout the world. And even once the game goes live, players will be able to. You mentioned you're a cartographer. And the scribe skills are also going to go in the game to be able to copy things out of the world. But nominally, a book when you make it will be an individual limited edition of one, unless you find a scribe to duplicate it. And so all those again will be in the game. But
that's awesome. I love doing that in Ultima Online. I'd write books and books, and then have a scribe copy them, and we'd put them on different doorsteps, and people would know the story of Chillbilly,
Exactly, as you should. And so as a thank you to the people who are helping us kind of fill out this content in a way that we frankly would have a difficult time as a crowd-funded game to choose to go. I mean, if we had to go pay for the music in a traditional way, we would, but boy, is it a huge advantage if we have the community bring it to us. And we both offer them a stipend, a cash stipend to help make the game, and we'll even double that if they'll take it as an in-game currency, because that saves us again that money. But for a lot of the groups who have just been so spectacular for us, we're doing things like this. And so this is a royal warrant that, for example, the College of Arms and the Poet Circle as a guild have earned these royal warrants. This one hasn't been colorized yet. This is the initial prototype, but those guilds are actually earning those from me and us as a team. And for individual contributions, we're doing, if a knighthood in England is referred to as the Order of the British Empire, so we have an Order of the New Britannian Empire, and we're actually giving medallions out to individual contributors who are doing particularly special things. So we're really trying to find a way to recognize and celebrate and give back into the community, let them know how much we really appreciate them, being with us on this journey.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it was something as simple as in Elder Scrolls Online, there's one of the main characters. You go into a bar, you talk to a bartender, and it's described as how Cadwell is mostly harmless. And it meant so much to us to have that small little thanks. And I mean, it said some stuff when we went to the studio, but just to have them do that, it's amazing that, because we love these games, so we want to be involved, and it doesn't take much to just say thanks. That's awesome.
Well, and on that vein, so if you guys confer amongst yourselves and decide, what is it that we could do to give you that special feeling in this game? Like, for example, one that really I initiated, but for the town I mentioned, and this was in the pre-show, I think, I mentioned this place called Pax Lair.
Right.
In Ultima Online, it was the first player town that got built, and it still runs to this day. And I was going like, those people were just really important. It was a huge part of one of the things I really liked about UO was going to Pax Lair, because it wasn't something we created. It had nothing to do with what we, the developers, did. And so I wanted to make sure that I provided Pax Lair an opportunity for Pax Lair in this game. And so, let us know from your guild standpoint, what would that mean to you? Is it a place? Is it a feature? Is it characters? Is it tools? What really would make this be the place that is the right place for you guys to hang your hat, for some period of time of your indefinite existence, and
awesome.
And we'll do it.
Very cool. Well, again, can't thank you enough. There's been thanks ad infinitum in the Twitch channel there. Just a lot of positive comments about how badass it looks, and that's all that good stuff. That
I gotta say,
Okay.
your crafting system is amazing from what I've seen so far. I think it's a beautiful addition, and I think it'll take crafting above and beyond for future generations of games, from then on out. So I just had to make that comment.
Thank you. And by the way, if you get in and play it, though, you notice you're always seeing things that are works in progress. For example, all the things I've mentioned are actually, I think, in there for at least some fraction of the things that can be crafted. But we're building in new features like, while most crafting is done by recipes that you can learn or discover, right now, if you have all the right ingredients, the crafting will succeed 100% of the time. And that is not the long-term plan. And so in the next couple of revisions, you'll get hiccups along the way that you can try to correct. So crafting will become more sophisticated than just a fire and forget. And so anyway, so you'll see new features even beyond what I've mentioned coming online as it gets more sophisticated.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and we're certainly, our guild is made up of experienced alpha and beta testers, so we're well aware that characters may be above your head or this way or that way, and things might be out of phase and stuff. It's all part of the different iterations as you go forward and stuff. So we're going to continue on now to chat specifically about ESO economics for a few more minutes. Before we do, though, I just want to say thanks very much for coming here today, Mr. Garriott. Really, your time is incredibly valuable, and we so appreciate you coming here. We do like to send a gift to our guests for being on the show and stuff, so don't be surprised to see a couple items in the mail, and plus some more funds added to your Kickstarter, of course. We're really excited about this.
All right. Well, all those were great, so I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks to you three, and thanks to the rest of the guild as well, and those of you especially those who are going to join us here in Shroud of the Avatar. Thanks, and I'll see you in line. I'm always in on the play sessions myself, so introduce yourself as a guild member when we see each other online.
Will do. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Garriott.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. It was amazing.
Thank you, Kemi. Bye-bye. Chili Billy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We'll see about
Wow. Just incredible. That, they're so busy, and he just spent 2 hours. Like he's been here for 2 hours and 10 minutes, spending all this great time with us.
I mean, as humble as they come. I mean, just humble.
Are we still streaming?
Yeah, we are, because we're actually just about to cover the ESO economic stuff. We got like 10 more minutes of stuff to cover. So if you don't mind, guys, just talk a little bit amongst yourselves about what's going on, and we'll just keep going here, and I will get to the next part. Let me just load up a couple of websites here.
We have the giveaway as well too.
Well, why don't, if you want, you can do that and do some shout-outs. If there's any shout-outs for guilds out there, I know Karen is here from Brotherhood of Redemption. Of course, a lot of people here from Mostly Harmless and some of our other allies, so certainly give a shout-out to your guilds in guild chat. We'll give those shout-outs right now while I load up ESOLoot.com and Tesso Elite's website there. And Chili, I'll pass the camera over to you for a second for your giveaway.
I'm bringing up the names list here, guys. This giveaway is coming from my sponsor for Tamriel Gold Goblin. That's GamerTimecars.com, and we've actually got some game time for one of you out of the 81 players or watchers here. This is for or viewers. I get watchers, but anyway, for the viewers. It's for Elder Scrolls Online, so if you play the Elder Scrolls Online, you most certainly want to be a part of that giveaway. So, pretty much, this is how it's going to go. If you get the answer right, I'm going to select randomly out of the people that are watching. The question is, what color shirt was Richard Garriott wearing for his interview?
There'll be a slight delay there for that, and so people hear that question there.
Yeah.
And we'll get back to that in a minute. Chill's going to keep track of that while we get on to a couple things. For the state of the game in terms of... let me actually bring these over here. ESOLoot and the marketplace. I'm going to just put that up. Okay. So, if you're an Elder Scrolls Online player, you've most likely heard of Wykkyd, who recently reached over 500,000 downloads of his add-ons on ESO UI. The first version of their website is available online right now. Again, ESOLoot.com with their first draft on features. Version 1 of the site will let you post auctions, buy auctions, bid on auctions, post items you wish to buy, offer items to those looking to buy and stuff. On their list of features that are in development right now for very quick release are an integrity rating system to show the general trustworthiness of buyers and sellers, a member rating system to provide feedback on your purchases and sales, a want to trade system where you'll be able to negotiate the trade of in-game items, and premium membership enhanced services such as value estimation, analytics, and pricing suggestions for the median value, suggested undercut value, and even more. Really slick economic system. I know there's been some people in the Twitch channel that have been saying some things about ESO and stuff that some people understandably they peaked a little early and then it's not quite the game for them, or they're just looking for something else. Not a big deal. This is about to come out on all the consoles. That's where most of its target market was originally and stuff. They're going to have a huge market there. We're running events still in ESO. We've got people still coming into the guild in ESO, people that peaked early and have taught other people about the game. Of course, we miss them at the party and stuff. The party's not the same without them, but it's just the way it goes sometimes. People play what they want to play. And the people that are still coming into the guild, I'm glad that there are some great people that are still leading there. I'm having fun on the Wednesday night we did PvP. Last night, Rorik was leading for a bit. Then people held the scrolls in different areas. The fights have been just incredible, and Craglorn's coming out. Game's not going anywhere. There's going to be a lot of people like Garriott of Brotherhood of Redemption. They're saying that they're going to be in this game for years. So To kick things off for ESOLoot, though, they're hosting a new member sweepstakes and a Conquer the Market contest where you could have a chance to win Razer gaming peripherals and other prizes. So make sure to visit the website for more details. I just want to show that website here. Here we go, ESOLoot.com. Item listing, here's some sample stuff. So just for instance, like what do you need to buy? Say you're looking for calcium magnet, and here's the starting bid, the buyout, expiration date of the bid, status is listed. It does not show who is doing all the stuff here, I don't think, but there will be a system for showing what is going on. The system has just been put up and stuff, so it's mostly these kinds of things. It goes live, I believe, and Wykkyd can correct me if I'm wrong. He is here in the audience. He's made so many good mods, and a lot of people have been contributing. Look at how many pages of materials there are and stuff here that are going to help you to get 33 pages of stuff. That's already 33 pages in there, and we're about to add a whole bunch more. We're going to put out a contest within the guild, try and get people on, because there are hundreds, possibly thousands of dollars of stuff based on how many people get involved in this. There is competition, of course, through things like Tesso Elite's got their marketplace system set up. Nice little system for going through. But as you can see, you're browsing, you're trying to find whatever. You can't search quite as easily as you can with ESOLoot. Zam is trying to come up with something. I don't think they have anything yet. I checked just the other day. They didn't at that time. So this is certainly, in our mind, the place to go for sure. You're going to be able to enter items, and as you've seen with any of Wykkyd's mods, they're just slick, really easy to use. Certainly going to be a good contest, and we're going to encourage most of our guild to start putting stuff in there right away. I don't think actually there was much more. Let me just check the audience stuff here. So Wykkyd's saying you can sign up starting tomorrow. It will not show the buyer or seller until you commit to a purchase. Okay, so that makes sense. There's a lot of stuff there to test the site at the moment. We're about to put in a lot more stuff from our own guild and encourage them to, of course, contribute. A lot of people in our guild that are just doing a lot of trading and stuff and enjoying that. Yeah, and then some comments, just people talking about PvE and PvP in the game and stuff, talking about ESO in general.
Okay, so I've got the winner here for this for the giveaway. The correct answer was a red. Some people put like a sage color. I don't know what that is. You're gonna have to go red, blue, or green. Like I don't know the off-brand colors, So
too complex.
Anyway, it was red, and I just randomly selected a guy here. I'm gonna go with Templar Raz. Congratulations, you've won I think it's a 30-day card or a game time card for Elder Scrolls Online. We'll be doing more of these giveaways, and hopefully I can talk Rook into doing some more podcasts and things like that with special guests. I've got a couple of people up on lineup for that, and hopefully we can do a lot more of these giveaways. So there's more to come. Just keep following Mostly Harmless' channel here, and yeah. So Rook,
awesome.
What do you think? More podcasts, more special guests?
Well, yeah, and I mean, first of all, just housekeeping. You've got a way of getting in touch with this person for their key. Did you want to give them an email somehow?
I do.
Or
I've got their
you've got it?
Name here. I'm actually gonna send them a message, and then of course the code is just gonna go directly into Twitch.
Okay, perfect. And so Chill's going to try and do that right now. If there are any issues, of course, you can come to the Mostly-Harmless-Guild.com website. You can, through Engine, get in touch with Chillbilly, and he will help you out. The other thing, just to mention...
I apologize.
Yeah?
It is actually a 60-day game time card. I'm sorry, it's not just a 30-day.
That's awesome.
60 day.
That's awesome.
I'll interrupt you.
No. Someone's fascinated by the blue lights on my headset. Nice. Or the way my face gets red when I talk for a long time. You should see when I'm talking to planes. The guys have a good laugh sometimes. I got to say a big thanks to Chillbilly. He is the one that worked so tirelessly to get Mr. Garriott on the show. So thanks very much for organizing this, and to Cami for helping to host it. I really appreciate all the hard work you guys put into to everything we do with Mostly Harmless. So thanks very much, guys, and of course we'll see you. Oh, sorry.
On the battlefield.
I guess gotta. There I don't even have to say it. There we go.
Do it again.
Okay.
We'll see you.
This is Rook with Mostly Harmless, and we'll see you out on the battlefield.
1942.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for coming, guys.
We're going to do Battlefield 1942 with Richard.
There we go.
Great. So we can, you want to announce it as a informal?
Yeah. We'll just chat about how that. Of course, the show is not started yet. We're just doing some informal chat. We always do a half-hour prep before the show. Mr. Garriott was available ahead of time, and we are set. So this is not the show, but we've just been chatting already for 15 minutes. There's a lot of interesting stuff that's come up, and I want to make sure I've got it recorded so we can edit it later and put it all together. So. Certainly welcome to the show, Mr. Garriott. Of course, this isn't the show. This is just preparing for it, but we'll do this all again in about 20 minutes.
No problem. It's obviously, I'm actually excited to be here with you guys, too. I mean, the little bit I know of your guild has impressed me, and as I mentioned earlier, I love the name. So I'm hoping we can provide you guys another good home to come play in.
That sounds awesome. Of course, joining us is Cami, co-counsel for Mostly Harmless.
Hey guys.
And economics advisor and Tamriel Gold Goblin founder, Chillbilly.
Yep, right here. I guess I ought to change that to Chillbilly now.
It's all good. Whatever works for you. It's pre-show. You were just saying that you play games, not just on the computer, but you've actually been playing more games now on your mobile. Is that correct?
Right. Well, what's interesting, if I go back and tell you my PC gaming history, I can name pretty much every game. To me, there's games that I play for just a couple hours because I'm just studying it, but I'm really not a fan, so I put it away. And then there's the games that I finish, which means I actually really enjoyed the game, and so I became a player. But I only have one of those every couple of years, it seems like, and I can remember them, most all of them, by name and sequence. The first game I ever played to completion that I did not work on or wasn't one of my friends' games was Myst, and then then not necessarily in order, things like the original Warcraft, the original Command and Conquer. In fact, I still think the first Command and Conquer to me is still the best RTS out there. The others kind of emulated it, but I don't think they necessarily improved on it.
Sure.
Things like Medal of Honor, Battlefield 1942, the original again, as much as the later ones. Most MMOs, honestly, I haven't played that much. I did a little bit of playing them to kind of understand them. The only one I played a lot of was WoW, which I think is great.
Yeah.
But very few of the others have really captivated me to play for dozens or hundreds of however many they had levels.
It's okay. We won't tell your wife.
But my wife is definitely not a gamer, which is I keep trying desperately to find something that she'll like. I'm still on that quest. But with the iPhone, even before the iPhone, there were always games like Snake or Frogger or whatever else on smartphones that were, if you ever tried to play those, they were usually not functional, frankly. I mean, the devices weren't capable of creating a good game. The first good game I saw on mobile, which was on the iPhone, was one called Spider, where you could drag your finger around and make a spider move around a house and jump from place to place to spin webs and catch bugs. And it used the touch screen beautifully.
Okay.
And that was when I went, now mobile games are finally going to come of age. And from that point on, there's been an explosion of great mobile games, and I happen to be particularly fond of tower defense games as much as anything else. So games like, I guess originally Plants vs. Zombies was my longtime favorite. Then things like Kingdom Rush and Kingdom Rush Frontiers have been more recent favorites. And I still try most of the tower defense games I try, but those are still probably my favorites, are the original Plants vs. Zombies and Kingdom Rush.
Yeah, I love Plants vs. Zombie, and it's really interesting to see like everything that the mobile has to bring to gaming. The whole fact that you can bring the touch in it, and there's going to be more and more like with the geolocalization and everything. There's just so much more that it can bring.
Yeah.
But the PC, I think, though, is where you can really have a community that plays together more than on a phone.
And that's what's interesting about that too, is I've always been a PC developer, and a lot of my publishing partners through the years have debated that stance, because there are years when consoles, dramatically outsell PCs, even their games dramatically outsell PCs some years of the past.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always been of the mind that by developing on PC, I'm constantly building my market from game to game to game. Whereas on the consoles, you make a bet on one console, and if you hit the sweet spot of its rise and fall and have the killer app, you do phenomenally well. But if you pick the wrong platform or you pick the wrong time in its cycle, you can really lose your shirt to keep that continuity. And so anyway, I've for the same reasons, for community and consistency, I've much preferred being both a PC gamer and a PC developer.
Totally agree with that.
I've got a curious question for you guys.
Sure.
I was just discussing this the other day. So what is your personal opinion about Oculus Rift?
I don't know a lot about it. I'm a little nervous about it being bought out. I've had friends that have played for like 3D type stuff, and certainly after 45 minutes of an intense game, they had a headache and had to put it down and stuff. So, and I'm not sure what the actual impact of that will be. I'm hopeful that it'll give the experience that I really would love for it to give, that next level. But I'm certainly hesitant when something that I feel is in its infancy. But I'm not educated on it, so I'm not the best person to ask.
For me, like it just I don't know, it just hit your imagination of where it's gonna go, how it's gonna stop. Like, are we gonna have things connected to our brain that you can see all the world all around you? Because like your eyes, what they see is just the data that goes to your brain. So what prevents them from just like doing impulse that goes into your brain, and all of a sudden you have like a whole world like 360 all around you?
I think for me, mainly. I always wanted to mount a TV on top of my ceiling so I could watch TV while laying on my back. And then I saw Oculus Rift, and I was like, that might be a little bit safer, So I looked at it that way. But I also thought about the different games. Like I'm big into simulator games and things like that. That's what I play generally, and nobody say Goat Simulator either.
We're teasing him about that a little bit.
It would be cool in Goat Simulator. I will say that a flight simulator, something like that you can look around and just enjoy your gameplay. But I think it would be best suited for like a first-person point of view versus a third person. It would just be like mounting a screen to your face. So I think as long as it's a first-person game, I think it should work. But
here's sort of my thoughts on it. Now, I know a lot of the folks involved with it, and so I honestly wish them the best success, and they're obviously doing very, very well. But if I go back to the very beginning of, in fact, I do go back to the beginning of gaming, and we've been talking about VR forever. As soon as you had a computer with a CRT, you immediately want to see it in 3D. You immediately want to see it with a head-mounted display or some other form of virtual reality. And every iteration we could, we went out and bought all the hardware that came out. And each time we tested the hardware, we go, this is still 5 or 10 years off before it's going to really be, ready for prime time. And then 5 or 10 years later, the next kind of big thing comes out, and we could play with it, and yeah, it still looks like it's 5 or 10 years off. And Oculus is by far the best that's ever been done, by a good margin, which is why I think it has a chance to work. But I still find that it's still something physical on your face. I mean, it's heavier than a pair of sunglasses, so it's not it's not something the players of Candy Crush are going to go put on their head.
Yeah.
It also does have lag, a little bit of lag in it, and the screens are pretty close to your eyes, and so you do have a reduction or a feeling of that. It's not as natural as watching a movie screen or a television screen. You do kind of feel this kind of difference. And there's things like, if you put your hands up in front of your face, you can't see your hands because the screen's between your face and your hands. And I hear people like Facebook now saying they want to build a billion-player MMO based around Oculus Rift, and I'm going, if you're targeting 1 billion people, you need to have a device that literally everyone uses, including those users of Candy Crush.
Right.
You're not going to get to nearly that scale without reaching non-traditional gamers. And so if what they were targeting was hardcore first-person shooter gamers, I'm going like, dudes, you can win that market because those guys, those are the people who are not only willing to pay more, but willing to hang something on their face and willing to wrestle with it to get it just right to interocular eye distance and all those other kind of things to maximize their experience. But as soon as you go into millions, much less billions, I think you're talking about a different kind of market, which is not which is not the hardcore gamer market, where I think you're the target they should be after.
Well, especially when you talk about MMO, like you need a lot of people to feed the MMO. Like if you play a new MMO and there's only like 100 people online, you're gonna be like, well, dude, this game sucks. Like, I want to be out of here because you need to have a big community, and you're not gonna have like thousands of people with that right away.
Well, and something as simple as 3D glasses or something, that's just like wearing shades. It's pretty natural, not a big difference. But yeah, we got some people in the audience commenting about the fatigue factor of wearing that. Pedro's commenting that at PAX Prime last year he tested it and he actually thought it would have a good market, and hopefully with Facebook buying it that they'd get enough funding to move forward. But that's a really good point. Like, you have to be accurate, realistic about what the target market is and who's going to I don't want to say endure it, but enjoy it, and whatever comes with that. So,
I would definitely try it.
Yeah, it's pretty. We've tried one here. It's definitely pretty cool. It's dramatically better than anything that's ever come before. And they have a new version I haven't tried that the friends of mine who have tried the newer version say it's truly a dramatic leap better than the one that I've seen. So we'll see. I think at least for true gamers, it's going to still be a hit. The question is it going to be a $2 billion purchase hit and be adopted by millions of sales, and
right.
And maybe they've got a longer term plan that I'm thinking of, that they're not worried about whether version 1 gets to that level, but rather whether they get version 5 to that level, which might be a more reasonable target.
Yeah. Now you're looking to use it. I mean, you had on your Kickstarter that at the $2.5 million mark, was it, that you were looking to start looking at some of the ideas for that? Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's why we, that's why we played with one here, was to specifically to keep an eye towards that. So I'm a huge VR fan. So if there is anything that is adoptable, we've already the current code right now today doesn't support it, but we hacked it in for a test when we had the development unit in here, and it's not hard to support. It's actually quite easy to turn on, but it will. We'll see when we do it exactly. Yeah.
And you mentioned, of course, big fan of mobile devices and stuff in terms of the games that you enjoy playing from month to month on those. I know you're looking to have Shroud of the Avatar be available offline as well on different systems. Is it only going to be on computers?
Well, it's a very good question, because let me kind of tell you the little story arc of how this how we arrived at something that is both online and offline, and probably will be available on multiple formats beyond PC. In fact, we're already on PC, Mac, and Linux. But we're developing in Unity, which is very, very good about cross-compiling different platforms. So that's how we can get on multiple platforms.
Right.
But the reason why we can play solo player and multiplayer and all these other modes kind of fell out of kind of one of my initial demands to the team. You know, if you think about a massively multiplayer game, you know, sort of by definition, you need to be online, and your computer is really just a dumb terminal, and the code, the game is really, you know, being processed in a server somewhere to protect the transactions to make sure nobody's duplicating items or killing things, cheating to kill things, whatever it might be, pumping up their stats, whatever it might be.
Right.
And but for me, because, you know, one of the reasons I play so much mobile is because I'm on an airplane once a week, well, twice a week, you can include both directions. I mean, I'm traveling for business all the time, and it was going to pain me that I wasn't going to be able to play as much as I would like the game that we were developing ourselves. And so I said, look, can we please have an offline mode? That was my first request is, can we play both online and offline? Well, to play offline, that means the server has to be on the same computer as the client. In other words, you need to be able to be your own server, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So both pieces of code have to be able to co-reside on your machine. Well, as soon as we said, okay, we'll do that, a large number of other options immediately opened up. For example, it means that if you, well, for example, let's say the four of us were in a dungeon by ourselves. Well, we all have both the client and the server code on each of our machines. And so the first person to go in the dungeon can become the server. And the rest who join can now become slaves to whoever was the first person in. And if that first person in leaves, he can just hand it off to whoever the second person was in, or whoever has the best connectivity or the fastest machine can take over being the master for that instance of that dungeon. And all it has to do to check in with our servers is the things that we think are important to safeguard, like treasure amounts and you know, character stats, etc. You know, there's a number of transactions that it confirms with our home server. Yep. But the majority of the work, like the things like the majority of the AI of a creature, where am I and which character am I chasing down, that's mostly processed on the player's machines because they all have clients and servers, and they all can confirm with each other what's really happening, if you follow my meaning.
I do,
That would base it off of the connectivity of the host itself. So let's say, for instance, take me for example. I have 4G internet at the house. I use an air card. My connectivity is okay as long as, I mean, I can connect to an MMO as long as I don't watch YouTube while I do it, you know, and things like that. Now, how would that affect me if I were to go into a dungeon and it select me because I have a faster ping or connectivity?
So, well, it's a blended decision making. So, you know, we'll optimize that over time. What it's going to try to do, if you're the first person in, then of course you are your own server, and so it's very fast. If suddenly I were to join you, I might now see you as very slow because your connection time to the real internet and back over to me might be very slow. So the server would immediately go, wow, I actually think that if Richard was the server, the total group experience of right now just the two of us would be better served if Richard was a server. So it'll just switch. It just steps over. It just steps across. And now I'm the server. And then as 2 or 3 or 4 people join, you know, I might, if I still have a good enough, if not the best connection and processing capability, you know, all the different factors, then I would stay the server. But then if I happen to leave or hiccup and disconnect, it would then go back to you 3 and go, okay, well, which one of you 3 of those metrics that we determine make the best play experience should be the host? And then it just skips over. But all that code is running concurrently on everyone's machine. So there's not even a hiccup time. It's not like it has to catch up. Everybody's machine is keeping the same drum beat. It's just one person is considered the master. And so if that person goes away in one beat, it just says now somebody else is the master. You know, it just keeps going. The heartbeat just keeps going. And so, but not only does that allow us to minimize what we need in our head servers by distributing a lot of that workload,
right?
It also means that we've done something else, because it means that we open up these other modes that you may have heard us talk about, like solo player offline. So with solo player offline, which means I'm not connected to the internet at all. Solo player online, which means I actually don't want to play with anybody else, but I do want to see the persistent world as it's changing. Meaning I want to see people building houses and their vendors that are out in the world because I want to buy or sell things into the economy of the main game. Then you could turn that up and say, I want to play, with I want to favor only people I know and know well, or I'm really game to play with anybody and everybody. And I missed giving you a piece of the technology that makes that possible, which is that if you look at most MMOs that are classical client server, like when we developed Ultima Online, we thought that we were going to put every person who would ever play the game all into one copy of the world, one server. Mm-hmm. We built a map of Britannia and a server that was strong enough to hold 3 times what was projected our lifetime sales. The EA told us our lifetime sales would be 30,000 units, and so we projected 100,000 units. And we thought, of 100,000 units, that means 10% of the people will be online at once at peak, which means if our world can hold 10,000 people, we're set. And so we built a world and a server set that could handle 10,000 people, and the game sold, 1 million copies or so, within the first few months. And we saw it coming because of how quickly the beta was adopted. But then we realized we can't build a server that can hold 1 million people in the same area at once. Each zone will be way overtaxed. And so we created copies, server sets, what's classically called shards now, which actually I was so upset from a fictional standpoint when we had to break it into shards because to me it meant that people playing in different shards were having a different world experience. One world might evolve differently than another. And if your friends signed up on a different server than you did, you would really have little opportunity to see each other. And so I was really disappointed. And so I invented the term shards and used the fiction of Mondane the evil wizard breaking the gem of immortality into shards, fracturing the original world into multiple copies, as a way to say that all the shards are still part of the same reality, and one day it might be reunified again. Yep. So that term shards is now used not only in all MMOs, but frankly all servers that have to be copied and duplicated, they call them shards now. So it's kind of an interesting fiction that has become spread out.
That's cool.
A standard that's become a standard.
Yeah.
But the point of that backstory was to point out that with Shroud of the Avatar, we didn't want to do that. With Shroud of the Avatar, I did not want to do shards. I did not want to take you away from playing with anyone you wanted to, any of your friends, anywhere in the world. We wanted to break up the world based on the friends graph, which is very complex and has overlaps at all levels. But if you think about it, if you're a guild, how many people are in your guild?
200.
200.
Yeah, 3,000 registered users as well.
The statistical overlap, if you're not planning to all get online at the same time, the probability of you just happening to bump into each other, being on the same shard, in the same game, at the same hour, in the same city as another member of your guild, just by chance, is actually relatively low. And even though you might run into 1 or 2, you're not going to statistically run into more than a dozen at a time unless you call people up and say, hey, we're going to have an event, let's all get together here now.
Sure.
And because of that, that means that if we create a game where we take an individual city, and as the city becomes overpopulated, we begin to split it out into temporary instances of that city, where you and everyone you know, plus a whole bunch of strangers, are in one, and the only people in the other copies are truly strangers. As long as the city you're in feels full, I don't think you're going to miss seeing 2 or 3 times that many truly strangers. And if you do the statistical analysis on a friends graph, it's actually pretty easy for us to constantly sort people into not only their friends all in one server, but their second and third tier connections can all be in one place based upon the probabilities of finding them in the same place at the same time. So you're all in the same world at the same time is the way the game's going to work.
Let me ask you a question on that note. In Ultima Online, and I hate to keep taking it back to that, but that's the only thing we can reference off of right now, just the way things are set up. But in Renaissance, you had Trammel and well, we called it Felucca, but Felucia. So that would kind of circumvent that whole thing. A player could play offline and not want to see anybody, and still be able to connect back to that online world and avoid the open world PvP, things like that.
No, that's exactly right. In fact, a lot of the big debates we still have, both on the team and especially as soon as you go on our boards and talk to our community, is what the PvP, PvE, PK rules and balance are going to be. And what's interesting is that if you take either of the two extremes, they would say they don't want to play with or without the others. What I mean by that is, if you go to the no PK rules people, they're going, look, if there is anything like open PK, then I'm just not going to join. I mean, I'm just not going to be there. I'm just not interested in playing in a game where I'll be randomly ganked. On the other hand, if you go to the people who like to not just PvP, but particularly PK, they're going like, well, if all the PvEers don't come, then it's less fun for them, and the game will be a lot less interesting if you do the Trammel-Felucca division. And in fact, when we did the Trammel and Felucca division in UO, frankly, the game lost a lot of its luster. I mean, we lost a number of players. We avoid pissing off the PvE people, but the total richness of the experience was diminished. I think I would make that argument. Yes. And so on this game, we're working very hard to find the right blend that both gives the people who if you do a split like Trammel and Felucca, you can definitely provide safety because it's kind of guaranteed. But you again lose some of that charm or storytelling. Even if I tell the stories of UO of the early days, I'm almost always talking about the Wild West aspects of UO that was kind of strange and exciting. And we're trying to capture as much of that excitement without crushing newbies and without crushing role players who want to have the chance to build a wonderful jewel of a player city that is not going to have a bunch of thugs come through and burn the whole place to the ground after they spent a year constructing it. And so I think we've got that with our current design.
And even if you're
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Amy.
Even if you're a good guy, or even if you don't want to PK yourself, I think it's always nice to know that around there's other type of players, and if you see them gank someone, then you can go and help, or just the fact that there's danger. I think it's really thrilling for a lot of people. So just having that mixity of different players, it's pretty cool.
Right, and one of the ways we're solving in this case is we have certain towns are very well defended. They've got these protective shields, sort of like a Forbidden Planet kind of shields that truly protect that city. And we've got towns that are way out in the wilderness that are absolutely less safe. And so I think we've got plenty of spaces where people can enjoy the role-playing life with little to zero to small levels of danger. And we've got gameplay and interest that is as far out into the fields as you wish. And because we have that blended world, I think it will work very well. Now, we haven't proven it, and we still have skeptical people who make actually reasonable arguments against it. For example, a lot of the role players would say, if you basically tell me I can't go into 10% of the maps of the world because it's so dangerous I won't like it, well, then I'm going to be disappointed that you've made 10% of this content that I really can't consume. And that's a fair argument, except that we are building an enormous amount of content. Yeah. And in fact, if you go in solo player mode into that content, if they really were so worried about it. But so I think we've got the bases covered. We're going to try this blended solution. I'm hopeful that it will work, but we have to prove it to players.
Yeah, I've got a few questions from the audience that comments too. First thing, PJT is saying that best explanation I've seen of sharding. Of course, a lot of you wouldn't have known the origin of that. That's cool. Another comment regarding the mega server / or peer-to-peer mega server with intelligent phasing, that in terms of what the actual basis is, now this is Wykkyd, he's quite into mods and stuff and knows his computers way better than me, but they're certainly curious about that. Sorry, actually, the other concern people had was whether people could go offline hack some stuff, and then when they come back and join in with the groups, how's that going to work? Just before we start the actual show.
Yeah, the correct question, and the answer is we've thought about that, and the answer is no. Once you take a character to truly offline, it can never come back online because you could mod it, and there's probably no way we could sufficiently protect from offline. Now, you can play solo player online or friends online or open multiplayer online, and those are all online, so we're confirming all the data with the servers.
Okay.
But the character that you play offline, never connected to the servers, it will never have a time that it can connect to the servers. That's a completely separate character, the offline character.
And do you think this game, this is from Boris Cat, he's wondering how accessible do you think this game will be for non-MMO audience?
So we've been working very hard to make this every bit as good, if not better, I hope, than traditional Ultima 1 through 9 story-based games. In fact, that's really sort of my forte. It's Starlong, Darkstar, who was Blackthorn in UO, who is driving most of the traditionally MMO-type features of the game. And I'm the one who sits here in this office noodling on virtue stories and quests and NPCs and the story arc that will take you through this. And for those who have played, starting with really Ultima 4 through Ultima 9, I think that I became, marginally competent interactive storytellers in a solo player game through that period. But once we went to MMOs with Ultima Online, the nice thing was it had the rich fictional tapestry of Ultima about virtues, but there really was no story. There was no Ultima-like story in UO, because stories were even harder to tell if you're in a massively multiplayer setting.
Sure.
But I've had time to think about that. It's been over 10 years, and we've made a couple runs at MMOs in the meantime, and I think now we have a very good plan. And in fact, if you want to, play it in solo player mode, and just play solo player all the way through, and you'll have a solo player Ultima experience exactly. And the nice thing about playing solo player online and to get to going back to Will's economy thoughts that he might have, the interesting thing that we're doing with the economy is that in most MMOs, for you to level up your crafter, you make a bunch of junk that nobody really wants repeatedly and have to kind of dump it in order to grind your way to some level of skill. So we put that in our thing and said, we don't want to force people to do that. That was one piece of data. Another thing we said is we also want to make sure that in this game, when you make something, that thing is special. So it not only has the crafter's initials, so to speak, on it, but also if that sword has been used to kill 100 trolls, and so it's now Troll's Bane, that's a piece of information about that weapon that should go on forever. And
cool.
And we said, in most MMOs, most of the best weapons or armor, or at least a lot of it statistically, the game kind of generates out of the blue. It either randomizes it, or the epic stuff is dropped by the boss monster somewhere that was created by the creators. In our case, we decided we're not going to do that. We're going to have the game make as slim to none as we can get away with. And all we're going to do is use player-created stuff, even if it was sold back to the store, as the stuff that shows up in treasures, chests, and monster drops all over the world. And so we're not going to compete with the player economy. We're actually going to continue to reinforce the player economy so that all things of value are things that have real history from the real person that really created it. And I think that celebration and and buying from creators in order to fill the game with content, I think is a win-win, for the games economy and the creator economy as well. And with that as a loop, then this solo player online, the one real downside to our one world paradigm, no shards, the one downside, or the one toughest point for us to manage, is housing. And
right.
For those of you that played UO, you might remember that the most expensive property in UO was always the places near Trinsic, because Trinsic had a really good crafting area, and so all the people going in and out of mines would come in and out of Trinsic. And so within a year of the launch of UO, there were shops right on that main road that would sell for thousands of dollars in real-world money on eBay. And that goes back to the truth of if your way you're having fun in a game is retail, location is really important. And if you build your weaponsmith way out in the mountains, no one's going to wander by to know that you're the greatest weaponsmith around unless you maybe do it as part of a player town that builds up some level of notoriety. And so we've made that problem worse by going to one copy of reality. And so real estate is actually probably going to be quite expensive, so to speak. We're trying to manage that as best we can to make the world big enough and enough towns to make us, enough lots to satisfy the demand. But I think that it'll be very difficult for us to stay ahead of demand, I think. But also by all these versions that are online, it means that, for example, if you're a blacksmith and you have a vendor that is maybe buying coal and iron ore and selling the actual weapons you've made, well, that house, your shop and your vendor show up on everyone's machine, no matter what instance they're in. And so even if I'm playing solo player, where the server and the client are on my own machine, and I'm just checking validation with the central server, I still see your vendor in your shop, and so I still buy the sword you made, and I still sell to you to use in the future coal or ore that I might have brought back from the caves. And so even playing solo player, you're really playing, playing alone together. You're still interacting with the whole community while you're playing in any of those modes, other than fully offline.
That changes things, yeah. Well, let me start the show officially. Now that we're at the time, I'm going to start with the 1-minute video from your channel regarding the SOTA start, and then we'll start from there. Let me just stop the broadcast briefly and then restart it.